Hey there, Professor K here with a quick tip on how to style your list items in a really fancy way that you might not have figured out yet. So if you've been watching Your Favorite Recipe tutorials, one thing that you might have noticed is that I've kind of quickly and quietly skimmed over how to do this this kind of like fancy list style here in 3. You'll notice that I don't even have those in my code here. And when I did that, what I did was under recipe directions, let's see if I can find that. I believe what I did was I actually just disabled the list style type. Let's find out. All right, so I'm just going to blow this up here. No, I didn't even do that. It's because I've got a negative margin on it. That's why you can't see it. So over here is our kind of like hidden little number here, and I've just kind of just scooted right on by that without telling you how to fix that. So if you haven't figured this out already, here's how you crack that. You actually aren't going to be styling this as a list style element, because if you've tried this already, you've probably figured out that you can't move those list styles anywhere. It's like near impossible, much less style them with a fancy box or anything like that. Instead, we're going to use pseudo elements to give this a try and get this in the right place. So let's take a look at how to do that. First of all, under recipe directions, I'm just going to double check I have the right selector here. Recipe directions cards is what I want. Under here, I am going to disable the list style type altogether. List style type, none. And that's because there's really nothing I can do with that. The list style isn't helping me. I need that counter in a different place where I have more control over it. Under recipe directions card, each individual item, this is where I can start playing with that pseudo element. So follow with me here. We're going to use a pseudo element of before. So before each recipe directions card, I want something to happen. Now nothing's happened here yet because we haven't given it a content property. All pseudo elements before and after require a content property. So here we're going to do content. A lot of times you'll see this set to blank, just like that, 2 quotes. That means nothing is there. And sometimes people will set like a width of 20 pixels, height of 20 pixels. Let's just do this for the sake of demonstration. And then they'll set it to display block. That's because by default, these pseudo elements are inline display. So this will give us the ability to set that width and height. And now we can see, oh, let's put a background so it's a little easier to see. Background red. Pop down here. Yep, so now we can see before each recipe directions card, we have this little box here. But what if we could actually, how do we get that number in there? How do we get that, each of these to put the 1, the 2, and the 3 in there? We do this by using a counter. So the counter content value allows us to actually say, okay, count these out and then put the number in. We can set what the counter is in here. So let's take a moment and just kind of see what that looks like. All right, so this is an article by Chris Coyier. Chris Coyier is excellent at his job. He is like the CSS person to follow. He really knows his stuff. He's incredible. So he's always writing articles about the best ways to do things in CSS. If you ever want to figure out how to do something in CSS and you see Chris Coyier as the author, that's a good source of information. So I'm going to borrow some information from here and say, okay, how do I do this? And you can see here that I knew that counter was kind of like the right thing to do, but I didn't know exactly how to implement it. So here you can see the list style is set to none. And then what he's doing is adding a counter reset and then naming the counter. So with counters, you have to kind of like name what they are, and then tell it when to increment. So let's borrow this code, making sure that we cite our source. And we're just going to do this right up here. Counter trick from Chris Hoyer. I like to put each on one line just to make it easier to see. All right, so what have we got here? Counter reset, and I don't want to use my awesome counter because I'm not going to remember that. I'm going to use one called directions counter. That's easier for me to remember how it's going. Then I know what the counter is for. Let's do a counter increment, and this is going to be on our LI. So on our recipe directions card, we want to increment each time the card shows up that directions counter. So nothing has happened yet. You can see we've still got that same content in our before. But now you can see that in the before, the content of our pseudo element is going to be a counter using this counter that we declared up here. So here we want our content to use the counter of directions counter. We want that value in our content. And now when we scroll down the page, now we have the 1, 2, 3. Now if we didn't have this counter reset, what would happen? It might work, it might not. It really depends on if there's other counters going on in the page. It's good to put in the counter reset so that if there are any other counters going on in the page, it doesn't conflict. So that's really important. So why do we care? Why is it necessary to put this in the before? Well, the reason why is because now that we have this in this place, we can position it. See how it's kind of like up here, but we really want it like down over here? We can use absolute positioning to get this effect. So remember with absolute positioning, you always want to say where you want to position to. And in this case, we want to position to the recipe card. And how do we do that? We say position relative. Position your stuff relative to me. Then down here, we're going to put a position absolute. And we're just going to do a top 0, left 0 to start. Let's see how this goes. Perfect. See how there's no extra space between our cards now? It's just putting in the upper left-hand corner. That's what we want. So now we want to think, okay, how far up the page do we want this to be? So let's see what we've got here. Sometimes I just do this kind of freehand. It can be handy, especially with glitch, because it refreshes if you change the this source, to do this in the inspector before you go any further. So that's where what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to start with the top 50% value. That gets pretty close. Nudge it up. That looks about right. And this may change. Let's try taking out the width and height. Yeah, because we want these to be really just kind of like relative to this number. And let's start and let's do a padding of 1em. It's a little too big, so let's do 0.5em, and then 0.25em, quarter of an em, top and bottom. See how that looks. A little bit better. Ah, much better. That's starting to look good. All right, for font family, we want, what was it, Bangers. And then sans serif as a fallback. Oops, spelled that wrong. We want our color to be white, FFF. And we actually want our background to be blue. Let's make it a teal so it's a little bit closer. And then let's do a box shadow. Let's get this like box shadow effect going on. So box dash shadow. And then remember, it's going to be X offset, Y offset, blur, which we don't want any here, and color. So let's do an X offset of 10 pixels, Y offset of 10 pixels, just to start. 0, and then red. Ooh, too much. Wonder if we could also do this in M's. 0.25 M? 0.25 M? Yeah, look at that. That's looking good. And then our final trick here is we just want this a little bit tilted so that this is no longer italicized. So how do we do that? We're going to do a CSS transform, just like we did back before. So remember, it's transform, and then what kind of transform do we want? We want to rotate. And then how far, in parentheses. Rotate -15 degrees. It's a little much. Might just be like -10 degrees. And you can see that this isn't quite perfect, but we're not going to worry about that too much. So if we resize this, is this going to do? That's not quite going to do what we want. That's not really what we want for the top value. This is where positioning gets really tough. So how can we position this in a way that scales with the viewport width? What if we tried something based on the viewport width? We could do like 13 view width. VW is the sort of, it's like the unit that is based off of viewport width. Let's try 59 view width. Yeah, that's looking better. That's closer. Let's stick with that. And left, I think we can make that just like a percentage or something, 10%. Yeah, so let's see what that looks like. Oh, you know what? What would be even better is if we did this, what if we did auto? Or how about 1M? 1M might be nice. Yeah, that fits even better. All right, so that's pretty close. We're going to stick with that. So let's grab all these, copy them, and then just paste them right into our CSS here. We're going to take out the width and height. We don't need those. We do need the display block. We do want the background. Let's get the proper colors in here. Cool. And then let's get the red in as well. So what's our red? And that's that. Look at that. Not bad. There's still some little things to do here, right? We don't have the positioning perfect. We don't have the font size exactly right just yet. Yeah, 40 pixels is way too big. We could even do something like you can base it on the view width. That can be fun. Then it'll scale as you go up and down. So let's try 14 view width. Too big. A lot of this is just playing around. Did you know I don't know these numbers offhand? Nobody does. How about 9? That's looking pretty close. How about 8.5? We're like almost there. All right, let's stick with that. No, too big. I think we better stick with pixels on this one. We want something reliable. How about 20 pixels? I mean, we could noodle around with this forever, let's be real. Oh my gosh, there we go, perfect, finally. So that's how you get the those list items styled in a different way. The key here is to use the content with a pseudo class and position it absolutely. In fact, anytime when you want to add a little bit of decoration, this pseudo class is going to be a really big help for you, either with before or after. You want to like do some funky things with shapes, this is your friend. So just keep it in mind for later. Now that we've got this, I'm going to show you how to actually implement your responsive layout in the your favorite recipe project. So I will see you in just a moment.